Maggie, can I let you kind of just conclude this session, and then we'll do some of our initial responses and release us all back into the wild on our Saturday evening.
I'd just like to thank all our speakers this afternoon for providing us with a detailed overview of the devastating impacts of large-scale agriculture on the Darling River system, but also insight into the complexities and connections of the communities that form that system. Now we ask the panel to conduct public hearings in the Murray-Darling Basin with a particular focus on the Darling River and Menindee Lakes to provide an opportunity for the communities to voice their concerns.
Thank you, Maggie, and thank you, everybody. Thank you. Let's give that session a big clap, please. So as we outlined in even in the program for today, what we're going to do is do a very sort of gentle, quick summing up of some of the key issues that as we see them, but then we're going to go away for a couple of weeks and put together some written materials and some recommendations. I'd like to start that summing up a little bit by saying thank you so much to everyone. It's been a very long and hugely informative day. The Tribunal was interested in beginning a process to look at the impacts of industrial-scale agriculture on the living world. And in our international information, we heard from people like Eric and Charles and Cormac about both the interaction of global capitalism and ecosystems and peoples. Eric spoke generally, but Charles spoke specifically about issues in Canada that are very reflective of what's going here. In the contextual information about Australia, I think it was very telling that when Warren shared with us kind of the overview of how some of the food systems used to work, and then how fences, sheep, cattle and water depletion started to impact. And obviously some of the photos he showed of soil erosion and other things are deeply disturbing. I think for the Brigalow Belt bioregion case, I think we were all pretty shocked when we could see the whole picture summarised. Obviously Martin Taylor's data on the animals and the plants that have been destroyed. I thought it was interesting, he said there was only 8% left of the original vegetation in the Brigalow Belt. You should flip that around to say 92%. 92% of everything that used to be there in terms of vegetation is gone. I mean, this is ecocide by any other definition. And I think just as my sort of final comment on the Brigalow Belt bioregion, to know that 45 million animals were killed in 1 year is, no one can say anything other than a complete and utter violation of the rights of the living world to exist. So if you were to apply the Universal Declaration for the Rights of Mother Earth on this, just this one bioregion in the Queensland space, we see utter devastation. I guess the only good thing, on the bright side, there were a lot of really positive stories about localised food systems, community-supported agriculture, and I found Professor Wilson's, George's discussion about sustainable wildlife harvesting extremely provocative and interesting. We may not all agree on the right way forward, but surely creatures that have evolved on this beautiful continent since before Gondwana land and continue to survive our onslaught today are part of our system much more than cattle, sheep, goats, and we must find a better way forward. So our Earth advocate Isaac invited the panel to open up a session for several months to actually invite people around Australia to share their stories from their bioregions about the impacts of agriculture. And I think we will do that to the best of our ability. Just recently, Gil, myself and Revel were involved in the International Permanent Peoples Tribunal on the impacts of fracking on human rights. And a woman here in Australia called Shay Dougal ran an incredibly effective online process where people could upload oral testimonies and upload written testimony. And something like 60 different folks or witnesses or groups were able to share their information, and that was part of it. So I think that might be some initial response from this panel will be to open up that process, and we'll think about the timeline for that and share that with our broader networks, but there's obviously a lot for us to digest. I won't talk much longer, but I just wanted to say that obviously for the Murray-Darling Basin, it's been a national shame for decades. our complete mismanagement of these places. In the last few months, as Ayla has been approached by communities up and down the Darling River and across the Murray, and I'm absolutely humbled to have been part of a group that's been invited to go down there next year. As Maggie has indicated, we have been invited to go down and just to open a space to bear witness to what the heck is going on, and to allow any First Nations peoples and any community folks who want to come forth and share their stories in public places with each other. And then we can compile some of that material with the help of the local folks to tell that story separate from government interference, separate from the alleged corruption that's going on between corporations and governments. So they're my initial responses. It's been a really profound day, and I'm truly grateful for everyone who's been part of it. To Warren and Fred, who came and spoke for country and for their regions, we're deeply grateful. And for everybody else, I think I'm going to have to go home and have a really large gin and tonic. It's been intense. And I'm going to go and think about the quolls that used to live on Gary's land, and they're gone. I'd like to see those quolls come back one day. That's what I'd like. Mary?
Yes, look, I can't remember everything you said, but I agree with everything you just said. Also, I'm, oh heavens, it's really depressing, isn't it? I mean, you know, I think I've reversed my original when I first came in, talking about the uselessness of having a revolution. Now I think that's actually what what should happen. Actually, I mean, it was very encouraging, and I thought it was wonderful. You know, older Aboriginal people getting really angry there, and older white people getting really angry there. It's very encouraging. It's great, you know. And also, you know, that there are so many people, blackfellas, of course, our own mobs. I know they've always been fighting back, but also a whole lot of very positive, clever ideas among mainstream about fighting back too, you know. It's just made me think a great deal about a whole lot of things, and I wanted to ask, Gil, make a comment about, because your experience of around the whole globe in all sorts of terrible areas, and I can't help thinking about all of what we've been talking about and been listening to. It's a big global system of a constant war on the environment, on the world, on the land itself, constant a normalisation of that war, actually, normalisation of war against peoples, in that they go hand in hand, a relentless commodification of the whole of life, and a kind of pornification of culture itself. They all go along hand in hand, and it's a large global problems. And I mean, you've travelled around the whole world and seen all this. How on earth do you start this without going into battle with states, with a small s, you know, with the state, and their compromised position and the compromised position of media too, with the, you know, corporations? Where do you start? Where do anybody, you know?
Good question for Gil. I'm glad you've been asked that question, Gil.
Well, I'm no Lenin, so I'm not going to be at the barricades soon. But yes, well, I agree. I mean, your analysis was wonderful. That is the situation we face. I think what is important and what impressed me was the amount of energy and thought and organization that is pushing back in this country, and I was probably unaware of much of it, and I think that's probably one of the most important outcomes of this session, which was all day. It was wonderful, I think, and will give us the basis for going forward, and in the ways that Michelle has suggested. I mean, being a lawyer and being on a tribunal, I guess I have to sort of sum up in a way, what I think has been decided. Others may disagree, I doubt it. I think the evidence was comprehensive, and it showed that the situation is dire. There needs to be a transformation of agriculture in this country, and the only way that the positive things that we need to happen will happen is for people to resist, organize, publicize, condemn, and think hard about the fundamental causes of our grief. So let's go for it.
Thank you, Gil.
Thank you.
Ross? You want Gwyn to go first? Okay.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wrote down some concluding remarks. So, as I said, this tribunal has started a conversation forcing a critical re-evaluation of our food production systems. Today, we have initiated an appraisal of the impact that industrial-scale agriculture is having on our continent. At the heart of this dialogue are our fragile Australian ecosystems with indeterminate boundaries and ecosystem services that sustain all life forms. We've heard of the Brigalow Belt bioregion transformed transformed for farming purposes, and enduring ecological and human harm inflicted with the putative knowledge that these practices are unsustainable. We've heard how Australian agricultural practices have presided over and been complicit in the conduct that has fundamentally altered Australian wetlands and our interconnected ecosystems. We're told of direct environmental assaults on the Darling River system, coupled with the more insidious and far-reaching malfeasance of land clearing, disturbing our ecological balance of whole districts, accelerating biodiversity loss and advancing an intensive form of food production with enormous associated reliance on chemical herbicides. We've heard from speakers who tell of we have heard from speakers who tell of industrial-scale farming practices that make a clear nexus between human agency and the destruction in whole or in part of precarious ecosystems. We've been told that our environmental protection laws are grossly inadequate, fragmented and conflicting. Whether designed or manufactured, our laws promote a pro-growth paradigm. We would appear to be without a legal protective framework or a proactive master plan. We answer Cormac Cullinan's call to imagine a new world where the best interests of the community as a whole is the overriding consideration. This is not a tribunal of accusations or recriminations, but a restorative and remedial justice forum. Whilst people's courts cannot make binding decisions, this tribunal can nevertheless support the efforts of communities across the world to seek justice by providing a forum to illuminate the challenges associated with selective case studies that we've seen today, to give a prognosis, to make predictions, to pursue closer examination of the evidence and make recommendations. All interested parties, as I understand it, will be invited to make submissions relating to the 2 case studies in the ensuing months. I look forward to reading those oral and written testimonies and submissions forwarded to the AILA website. I concur with the Tribunal's recommendation to have a People's Tribunal in the Murray-Darling, in the Darling River and Menindee Lakes region. And I anticipate that the Tribunal will deliver its recommendations in due course. As a personal note, I'd like to thank the speakers, the volunteers, all the civic society groups, and the participants who have contributed to this tribunal. But most importantly, would like to thank the First Nation peoples who've been so generous in sharing their knowledge systems, their ecological wisdom, and for their speaking for country.
Thank you, Gwen.
Can I just make just a couple of observations about today? It's really honed in the fact that it's a take society. It's just take. Nothing's actually given back. Pretty much like any extractive industries around the planet, it's just take, and take. And there's consequences and there's destruction associated with that particular behaviour. We've seen that particularly with the industrialised society with its extreme acceleration since the 1950s. My real concern is the planet is losing its rights. And the consequence of that, we're losing our own cultural identity, cultural rights, in terms of just being people. And with the consequences of some of the stuff that we've talked about today is the human rights. You all have human rights within this room. And I noticed that through disempowerment is where a lot of that's coming from. It's who holds the power, who holds the control, and obviously that's government administration and so forth. The major concern that I guess that I sort of come out of today, and it was resonated with Auntie on the video, is around that social determinants. People not being able to do, and the old gentleman not being able to take a yabby, not being able to go fishing, not being able to do boating, not being able to swim, not taking your dog down to the river. Those are all critical factors in terms of a healthy environment and a healthy society. Those are taken away. And from taking those sort of types of things away, and Auntie also mentioned around suicide in the broader society and mental health generally, that's really resonated with me today. I think those social determinants as a community, just in that Darling Basin alone, is phenomenal. I don't even really want to know what the statistics are, but those social determinants are critical factors. And it's the old saying, and it's really true, is that a healthy planet means healthy people. And right now we don't have either of those, and we're getting worse. But in saying that, I always think about this in the glass half full, and I think the glass half full is here, and I reckon we should bring on a red gum inquiry.
Oh, I like that, the red gum inquiry. Okay, so look, I would really like to thank my lovely colleagues up here today. We've, I guess, sat here to listen and to share and to provide a platform for future discussions. This isn't the end, it's the beginning. And I guess a simple issue is if you registered for the Tribunal, you'll be on our list and will be kept up to date. If you haven't, shoot us an email and we'll be opening up a little portal on the website to continue these activities and let you know when other pop-up situations will be available for you to be part of. I think on that note, and given the time, with deep gratitude, I'd like to say thank you to everybody. I now declare our Tribunal closed and the pub open. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. Thank you so much.